Good day, everyone. Good day. And another wonderful day with a very interesting person. I briefly spoke to her literally for not more than a minute, and she said a few key words, and I said, "Huh, stop there. No, we're going to have this in the podcast and we're going to discuss this properly. But we'll do it in the correct way. So I'm not going to introduce her. Otherwise, what happens is a situation I talk too much, and we all know this. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, give us some background from the point of view what she's doing now, where she's going, and then we're just going to go with the flow. Shana Francesca, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I'll just briefly introduce myself and then we'll kind of get into it. So my name is Shana Francesca. I'm a scholar of intentional and ethical leadership and living. What in the world does that mean? It means I empower people to understand what it is to be an ethical leader, to show up in the world as an ethical human, to understand how to cultivate actual relationship rather than proximity, and that the understanding that truly ethical relationship is the foundation of basically everything. And so when we dive into that, when we really empower and embody that within ourselves, we infuse our lives with hope and joy, which I think so many people desperately want and need in their life, especially in this moment with what's going on in the world. So I was telling you that I was born into an abusive household and raised inside of a religious cult, and didn't understand it. I knew the environments were oppressive and they were not allowing me to embrace my humanity, but I didn't have that language when I was a kid. But I certainly did realize they were harmful and left at the age of 26. And kind of began trying to figure out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to navigate the world and what questions I could ask, that I was allowed to ask, that I should ask, because when you grow up in high control environments, curiosity is not allowed. Curiosity is it's in direct opposition to those who wish to control you. Because curiosity is the foundation of all learning, of all connection to ourselves and to one another. And abusive environments need you to be disconnected from yourself. They need you to be in constant self-protection mode. They need you to feel isolated and disconnected from learning and understanding, especially the greater and bigger picture, in order to control you, keep you in fear, keep you angry. These all keep you in isolation.
Can I just stop you there, just quickly? 26 years is a long, long time. And so when you came out in the world, and we will go back, but when you came out the world at 26 years, that wasn't a fast transformation, trying to find out what is supposed to be. Now, when that 26 years hit, and you came out in the wild world, what hit you immediately when you thought, oh, this is different? This ain't right.
Well, it was kind of the opposite. I kind of started to realize very quickly that there were significant reflections of the environments I had just left in our society at large.
Really?
Yes. Yes. And it's why I do the work that I do now. And it's also why those environments exist. They are just the natural extreme of what already exists ideologically in our society.
Okay. So what were the first few things that hit you, that surprised you, that was a correlation between what you've just come out of and what you're about to go in, even though it wasn't as intense of what you came out with? But what was those few things that thought, hold on, this is very similar?
Yeah. For instance, some of my first, like one of the first important jobs that I had out of college, like the first one that I really felt like, okay, there's room to grow here. There's room to become something here. I was about 25, 26 when I got that job. I started out as a designer and then moved into sales. And the boss that I had at the time was consistently taking advantage of the fact that he knew I didn't know how good I was. he knew I had come out of a high control environment. He knew. And he used that to his advantage. And in my first year in sales, I did $600,000 in my first year of sales.
Wow.
My second, I did 1.7 million and at a 19.6 GP. And he paid me $50,000 that year. 51, actually, $51,000. When I had made a net profit for the company, the profit off of those projects was over 350,000. It was closer to $400,000. So, I began to realize that there was a lot of people in our society who take advantage and benefit from and will not seek to uphold and uplift you and to mentor you, but instead take advantage of your lack of self
awareness.
No, I'm extremely self-aware, always have been.
What, at the time you were extremely self-aware at the time?
Of course you are. Of course you are. When you grow up in an abusive environment, you have to be not only excruciatingly self-aware and self-critical.
Okay.
That's part of abuse, is getting you to turn on yourself and to self-police.
Yeah.
But you also have to be extremely good at reading other people. And so I knew my boss was exploiting me, but I didn't know how to make it stop. I didn't have the confidence to stand up to him. And I would ask, I had enough confidence to ask, right? To try to negotiate my salary, to try to negotiate to make better money. But the man looked at me in the face and said, well, if it wasn't your second year in sales, I would have paid you over $70,000, but I won't because it's only your second year in sales. So he looked at me in the face and told me he kept 20 some odd $1,000 of my money and felt comfortable and confident to do so. And I may not have known how to navigate that situation. And maybe there was no way for me to navigate that situation other than to recognize that in that moment, I began to realize my worth and my value and to be able to find my voice. But there's a lot of people who are in leadership positions who have been raised to think that leadership is about paying people as little as you can, getting them to do as much as they'll be willing to do, working them as hard as you can, and being in control, getting to tell everybody what to do. And that was never an acceptable definition of leadership, and it's no longer being tolerated. For good reason, right? It also stagnates innovation. It stagnates profitability. And a lot of corporations, a lot of organizations are struggling with this at the moment, recognizing that the pattern that they have been embracing inside of their organization for decades now, and more specifically, especially for this last 5 to 10 years, isn't going to sustain them long term. And so I work with a lot of leaders to help them to understand that leadership is about an ethical relationship with those you lead, that when an organization, if you want it to be truly successful, it has to operate as an ecosystem, as a bubble of life. And that takes commitment on your part as a leader to understand and embody ethical relationship.
Yeah, no, totally. You've gone through a huge amount, and we've not even scraped the surface, to be honest. And you've obviously got to the stage why you do this to help people to become ethical, because you had this background. But if we go right back, how did you get into that environment? Was it a situation you've always been in that environment, as a child, or
I was born into it.
You was born into it.
I didn't have a choice. Yeah. So, when you're born into an abusive household, the thing about religious cults is that they are magnets for abusive individuals, because abusive individuals recognize that their abuse will not only be tolerated, but fostered inside of those environments, will be protected, will be encouraged, whether overtly or covertly. And so the organization that I grew up in was hiding. They knew that there were men inside of the church who were beating their children, kicking them, beating them to the ground repeatedly, often. One woman went to the police, and the church told her to drop the charges or she was going to be removed from the church. She would no longer be welcome. And the churches here, they're mandated reporters. If a child is being abused, you must report it to the authorities. You must report it to child services.
Yeah.
And none of that was done. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite. And it caused excruciating amounts of psychological harm and physical harm to those children. For myself, when I let my mother and the church know, my mother knew about the abuse. She was being abused physically by my father, verbally, financially, sexually. But when my father turned that on to me and started making sexual advances, the church hid it. I was a minor. The church also was required to report it, right? And there was other men in that church. I was being stalked by another member. The church refused to step in. He was following me all around the church building. They could literally see, they had witnessed it. They witnessed it and told me that I should just avoid him. You can't avoid a stalker. That's the point, right? If I could, I would. I'm just trying to go to the bathroom, and this man is following me into the bathroom. So, there was all of these things that were being hidden in order to protect the comfort of those in authority, and in order for them to continue to be able to make the kind of money that they were making off of those who were in attendance, right? And so if they hold those people accountable, those people are no longer going to be paying their tithe and paying the church monies, so on and so forth. So, when you grow up in those environments, you're not there by choice. You're certainly not there by choice. And they're so, when you're in those environments, they disconnect you from everyone outside of them, right? So I had no connection to anyone outside of those environments, even though we didn't, it's not like we lived on some kind of, piece, everybody lived on some piece of property all together, so on and so forth. But it's a psychological control, right? And you're taught to fear everyone who's not part of these organizations, and so on and so forth. And then you don't have any resources. I grew up poor, so I didn't have any resources to be able to leave those environments, nor did I know if there were resources available to me. So, it's various levels of control. Various levels of control.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. You've gone through a lot. Now, you've also got neurodivergence. In what form have you got it, and how does it affect you?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD at 5. I don't love to put it in the terms of like, how does it affect me? It's just more about like, how do I show up in the world? Because I think it's our world and the way that our world is set up that disables people, because it chooses not to include them, rather than the fact that we are actually not capable of tremendous and amazing things. Yeah, I have ADHD. I am an incredible systems thinker. I am extremely analytical. I digest large swaths of information very quickly. I'm able to connect the dots and to, understand the bigger purpose and the bigger connections without somebody having to point it out to me. Give me a little bit of information and I will run with it. But I run into issues with executive dysfunction at times, with, the overwhelming sensation that there's going to be a lot of things I'm going to run into that are going to make me uncomfortable and dysregulated.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot to work through those moments. Like, for instance, to find a new doctor for something that I've been diagnosed with, right? To like find a new doctor, to figure out if they will accept my insurance, to figure out if I'm comfortable with them, to figure out if it's close enough to me, and then to understand, my co-pays and all of these things, right? It becomes a lot of layers of things that must be done that becomes overwhelming to me at times. And it'll take me more time than, the other people may just pick up the phone and think it's not that big of a deal, but for me it becomes very overwhelming.
I understand.
But when it comes to writing a speech and standing in front of hundreds of people to deliver a speech, I'm good. I have no problem with that.
God, I wish I had some of what you had, because I'm just the opposite. I mean, I get the overwhelm because I'm neurodivergent myself. I get the overwhelm, so I appreciate what you're saying there. And I totally understand when you're talking about problem solving. You seem to see patterns,
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, you don't know why you see the pattern, but you know the pattern's there and you solve the problem, right? And
Yeah.
that's typical of our skill set, which is unique to us, which is a massive plus. And I'm glad I and you have that skill.
Yeah.
You know, but the overwhelm, I must admit, it took me a very long time to know how to deal with the overwhelm. And I still get the overwhelm. It doesn't leave you. You just learn how to cope.
Yeah.
Right? You go,
You
right.
learn how to ask for help. You learn how to find support. You learn, so on and so forth, so that you can, function well in society and make sure that you're taken care of.
Yeah, no, totally. And how do you deal with the overwhelm? When you get that overwhelming feeling, what do you do to alleviate it or cope with it? Or what is
Regulate, yeah. To regulate myself, there's a variety of things. I have sang since I was a kid and danced as well. So usually there's some version of like humming or singing or taking a long walk, sitting with my dog. So, like for example, if I'm trying to find a new doctor, I might just go put on my headphones and go make a phone call. I'll be moving while I'm making the phone call. That way I'm regulating myself through the moment. And it makes it a little bit easier to not like chicken out. I don't want to call it chicken. I mean, there's probably a better term for it, but it makes it easier for me to process what's going on in my body and all of the anxiety that's coming up to be moving. So that's usually my go-to if I need to have an uncomfortable conversation or sometimes like if I hate paperwork. So if I have to fill out an application,
touche?
I'll put on music, right? I'll make sure that I'm listening to music, something that has a really good beat, like
Yeah.
Renata or an artist like that, where I'm going to put that music has a great beat, but it's not something that I would like, not like Dua Lipa, where I want to like burst out singing. I need to focus on what I'm doing,
Yeah,
right?
I get
But
that.
at the same time, distract my brain. So I just find these ways of like, working through my executive dysfunction. Those things helped me. That doesn't mean that it's helpful for everyone. There are people with executive dysfunction who's much more severe than mine, and them listening to music wouldn't regulate them enough. They really need someone to come in and to maybe do that, sit with them and do that paperwork with them, or do the paperwork for them, and kind of be dictated to them. There's all of these different ways that people learn to cope with the world around us that asks us to do things that are quite dysregulating.
Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back in the days to when it was really difficult for you. Now, obviously, you would have felt the difficulty, the overwhelming, etc. Did you find a way with all the chaos that was going on around you? Did you find a way to regulate yourself as a child? Because I suppose you didn't get the support that you needed to help you from that point of view. So did you find a way as a child to help yourself go through those difficult moments? And approximately what age did you find, if you did find some solutions to help you through?
Yeah, it was usually to go outside. We had a big tree in our yard, so I would go outside and I would climb the tree. I wasn't allowed to go, until I was a little bit older. I wasn't allowed to like go on walks by myself, but I could go out in the yard and play, or go out in the yard and climb a tree. Once I was like, 10, 11, I was able to, I mean, I'm 40. So like back then here in the US, like kids played with other kids. You just, you had to come in when the sun went down, or when it was bedtime. So, I would go walk around the neighborhood, see if anybody was outside, and, or go ride my bike or something like that, that I could then just be outside, be away from the noise, be away from all the sensory overwhelm, and just be able to feel safe in my body again.
So basically, in a nutshell, what you had to do, you had to have your own space, which was number one.
Yeah.
And you had to have some kind of calmness, quietness, that type of thing, so you wasn't overwhelmed with any other noise or movement or whatever. So
yeah, because I wasn't allowed to lock my bedroom door. I wasn't allowed. I didn't really have there was a lock on it, but you could simply put your fingernail in it and twist it. So my parents first of all, my father wouldn't allow me to lock it.
Yeah.
And second, if I did, he would just barge right in and assume I was doing something wrong. So I would get in more trouble. And, you know, for something that a child shouldn't get in trouble for, just wanting some quiet time. So yeah, it wasn't safe generally if my father was home, to assume I could get that quiet time in my bedroom.
Yeah.
So it had to go elsewhere. Yeah.
Sorry, I know it's difficult talking about that situation, but I'm just trying to have people understand that there are ways, even when you're growing up and as a child, even though you're not getting the support, there are ways that we can cope, and there are mechanisms in place to help us get through. But it was particularly,
I mean, but it just depends on your particular situation. There are children in abusive households who don't have the option to go outside. They would be in danger if they tried to leave their home, because they're, you know, abusive individuals demand submission of your entire self. They demand that you do not have any autonomy. And the minute you try to assert autonomy over yourself, they feel like they're losing power, because they are. But there is no such thing as ethical power over someone else. The minute you have power over someone else, you have crossed into unethical territory, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to control someone else, them honoring their own needs and trying to create boundaries is an affront to that power. And so there are people in the world who don't have the option to quite so easily regulate themselves. They'll figure out a way, but they can't just walk out. They can't just leave, because they'll get beaten when they come back, or they'll get chased out, right? So it's not quite so simple. It's not quite so simple.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. So let's go back to how you help individuals now. So just give me some examples how you would help with your experience, and you've got extensive experience, how you would help individuals. So give me some scenarios.
Well, typically I'm not a coach, so I don't typically, although people do hire me for one-on-one work, typically how I work is through, I deliver keynotes, I work doing consulting, I do workshops. You can find my workshops through my website, which is actually, we're in the process of rebuilding my website right now. Moving it to a different platform so we can make it a little bit more user-friendly. But that's typically how I work with people. I have some masterminds that I'm launching in the fall, in October, to provide people with like an opportunity to both work with me and get the beauty of being in the room with other people. There's something really magical that happens when we work together, right? That doesn't just happen with one-on-one interaction. That I think makes this work much more powerful. So typically people come to me because I think for most of us, no one sat us down and said, this is what relationship is. This is how you show up in healthy relationship with the world around you. No one really defined it for us. They modeled it, but they didn't even necessarily know those things. So their model was incomplete.
Yes.
And so, the conversations that I have with people are around, what is intentional and ethical leadership, right? And what does that empower inside of our organizations? It drives innovation and profitability, right? But it requires us to honor our people and to have an ethical relationship with them. And what does that mean? And how do we do that, right? Some of the most profitable companies and most successful companies in the world, that's what they do, right?
Yeah, definitely.
They honor their people. You look at organizations like Pixar, and like Gore and Associates, and some of these organizations that are driven by innovation and creativity, they honor their people in really beautiful and incredible ways. And then we'll have conversations around how, like for your people, how do we, let's talk about cultivating curiosity, right? Let's talk about what that does for us to reconnect to curiosity, and how it improves our lives and the lives of everyone around us, because curiosity is the beginning of all relationship. And when we think about it, innovation is just a reimagining of relationship, right? So whether we're talking about innovating our connection to ourselves, the world around us, actually creating products that go to market, deciding how we go to market, who we're marketing to, all of these things come back to relationship. So really understanding what relationship is and what it requires is necessary for that, right? So we're having a variety of these conversations that really transform corporations and organizations' culture, the way that people feel empowered to show up,
Yeah.
and then drives innovation and profitability.
It's powerful what you do. I mean, you've been doing this now for quite some time, and have you got any plans to change things in a way, or what are you doing for the future to just put a bit of extra of yourself to make things a bit different? Or is everything working the way it should do and you're happy with the format you have?
Yeah, I'm focused right now on paid speaking engagements. That's what I'm focused on. I do, speak for nonprofits, and, will either waive my fee or compromise my fee because I know we have limited budgets. But I do have asks for that. So like I'll ask for non-monetary compensation, like great introductions and, so on and so forth. So I'm looking for speaking engagements for next year. I'd like to, so between my workshops and my keynotes, I'd love to be able to book 50 speaking engagements for next year. So I'm already booking out next year, obviously, because that's a lot to do in just a few months.
Of course.
And that's really the goal. And because, I love working with organizations one-on-one, and I'm doing more of that as well. But to be able to talk to a whole room full of people from all different organizations, right? We can then we're pushing, being able to move these ideas forward in profound ways all around the country, all around the world, right? All at the same time, because we've got a whole variety of people like, oh, okay, I see it now. I get it. Okay, let's do something with this, right? And so I love being able to talk to groups of people. And then oftentimes what happens is several of the people in those rooms, they'll bring my work to their organization, and then I get hired by that organization. So it really just becomes this, and then we get to drill down and really, implement these ideas in their organization in really powerful ways. So that's the formula that works for me well. So I'm sticking with that for now.
Yeah, so you like the engagement with one. Well, it's not one-on-one, but it's one-to-many, basically, and you love that engagement and that feedback.
Yeah, and you know what? It does kind of feel like one-on-one because, I love speaking in front of people, so I'm able to like connect with people and look at them in the face and see, okay, are they connecting with this?
So even though there's a lot of people there, you still feel from your perception.
We can see you, yeah, on the stage, even if there's thousands of people. As a speaker, we can see every individual face.
Okay.
I mean, unless the lights are super, super bright, you can see people. And I prefer them not to be blinding in my face, but yeah, you can see people and you can see their reaction, and you want to know that you're connecting with your audience. For me, I want to know that I'm connecting with the audience. I want to connect with the audience. I want, like, are they nodding along with me? Are they taking notes? Are they connecting to this? If not, I'm not doing my job very well, and I need to make a pivot. I need to make a shift, right? So yeah, no, I love connecting with the audience. And I love talking with them afterwards. Oftentimes people come up and they talk to me, and, and I love that part.
Oh, well done. I mean, you're obviously doing something that you have a passion for, and that's what majority of people in life don't do. They really do things that they don't really care about. It's just a money situation, which I think is pretty sad.
But they can really have a choice. I mean, unfortunately, our world give everybody the choice to do what they love.
Exactly. And you've put yourself in a position where you're actually working with your passion, and you're actually adding to people's lives.
Yeah.
Which brings a huge amount of joy to you and everybody else, which is beautiful to hear. And especially when you're neurodivergent, it hasn't stopped you at all. To the point, it's done the opposite, because you know where your strengths lie, and you've worked with your strengths, and that's why you're in your position you're in, because you're focused on your strengths, and their weaknesses, you understand that. And you don't really push yourself doing a job or doing things in a way to work on those weaknesses that's always going to be there permanently, Yeah,
well, because for neurodivergent people, and it expands beyond that, it's not a weakness, it's a disability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the same. It's not like you can't strengthen a disability,
Mm.
right? That's not how it works. You have to learn how to compensate for it. You have to learn how to get support through it, but you can't strengthen a disability. And so I refuse to buy into the idea that I should or should have to.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I just live my life working to figure out how to be the support for other people in ways that work with my strengths,
Yeah.
and for me to then be able to garner the support I need
Yeah.
in ways that I can't move through.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I do. I've used technology mostly just to work with my, I call it weaknesses. And I'm happy with that. I've accepted the way I am, and I'm actually glad, because the strengths I have, because of my so-called disability, it's actually made me stronger and unique compared to other people. And once you own that and you accept that, things get a bit easier. Do you not think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you then embrace the things that are good, and then you think, right, those are the things that are good. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and you're in a happier place, and there's no two ways about it. So you are going to do some great things going forward. You're happy with your bookings that you're getting next year, and you're obviously making an impact because of that.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your past, because that's not easy to do. As much as I know, listeners, you've listened to her and she seems reasonably comfortable, but it's not a comfortable, but she's sharing because she wants people to understand, this is how it is, but this is not how it's supposed to be. And that takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts. Shana, thank you for sharing that, because that's not easy to do.
No, it wasn't easy at first. Now it's normalized in my life to just share those things, but it certainly isn't easy at first. But part of gaining your confidence and moving through your healing journey is finding your voice and using it. And it's an important, powerful part of, showing up as yourself. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that makes totally sense. Can I ask you, have you found consolment with other people similar in your situation in the past?
No, I don't seek out. let me clarify. I don't specifically seek for other people to understand how I grew up and understand, like, I don't, when I first came out, no, definitely when I first came out, I was looking for other people who had experienced similar things.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized is they became very toxic relationships.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't seek out people who have gone through the same things, or we inevitably kind of find each other.
Mm-hmm.
But where I am in my journey, I'm finding other people who are in similar places in their journey. They're not fresh out. And I support absolutely people who are freshly out of those scenarios. But there's a lot of work to be done. And that kind of pulls me back, right, emotionally, into a place that can really become a kind of black hole. So, I direct people to organizations and resources that help them to deal with what they're dealing with where they're at.
Yeah.
I don't seek out other people who, so I'm more at this point, work with other, and talk with other scholars who are doing other incredibly important work that's, not necessarily even adjacent to my own, but somehow we find adjacencies. So I'm more interested in connecting to really incredibly interesting people who have really fascinating things that they love to learn about. Whether that be personally, professionally, whatever it is, I'm just always looking forward to connecting to really interesting people in the world.
Yeah, and and because of your past, your colorful past, it's brought you to a stage you couldn't have done what you've done by helping the people you have done if you hadn't had the past you had. As callous as that sounds, it's brought you to this stage because of what you've gone through. because we are the sum of what's happened in the past, and now we realize and we try to better and move on.
Sure. I think, yeah, I think we're the sum of our perceptions of what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How did it affect you personally when you had personal relationships and things like that? So you had the ADHD, and then you've had to adjust in personal relationships. How did that come about, and how did that affect your ADHD too? Because I take it you weren't allowed to have personal relationships when you were there, and not from.
No, I was allowed to have personal relationships with people who were also in the same school, church, cult that I was in. I wasn't allowed to date or anything, if that's what you're asking. I did date, though. I just hid it. But yeah, personal relationships are there. When I left those places, I had to leave behind all those relationships because I knew I didn't want to spend my life explaining why I left.
Yeah.
It wasn't anybody else's business. It wasn't my responsibility to explain myself, nor was I going to take that on. Because when people ask you to explain yourself, often they're going to ask you to defend yourself right after that, if not at the same time. And I knew that wasn't my responsibility, or I just was simply not interested in taking it on. And so I just did what I wanted to, and started developing the relationships that I wanted to. Yeah, I have ADHD, so my relationships don't look like maybe, I don't know what is typical anyway, but maybe what holistic people's relationships look like. My friendships, we disclose a heck of a lot. We talk about a whole variety of things. Talk about what we're passionate about. We talk about, a whole variety of things. And they're not like surface, how's the weather, kind of relationships. But we might not see each other for we might even just see each other like once a month or a couple times a year or something like that.
Okay.
It depends on the friendship, depends on the relationship. But I would say I'm a person who knows a lot of people, and I care for a lot of people, but I can't keep a lot of people very close to me. It becomes dysregulating. I don't want my phone going off all the time. Like when I'm done working, I go to my networking events, and then,
it goes off.
Yeah, then I need to kind of regulate myself and have some quiet before I go to bed.
So basically what I would say, that you have associates. You have a lot of associates, but you have a very small circle when it comes to friends, etc.
Yeah, there's probably like 5 or 10 people who there's like 2 or 3 who, I could call and say anything. If I needed something, they would come for any reason at any time. And then there's like 5 to 10 people outside of that who I'm quite close to and will call me, or I can call them if we're working through something or need support, and so on and so forth. But I don't think I need more than that close to me,
No, I get that. I mean, otherwise it's stifling too. Quality is better than quantity.
Well, yeah, it's not possible to manage that many very close relationships. It's just not possible. Yeah, not with the time I have available to me.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. But the main thing is that you've put a circle around you that works for you, and
oh yeah, there's a great community.
And you can trust that circle, and then that's it. It's manageable, as you say, and then you can, and you're not watching your back either.
No, because we have shared values.
Yeah,
we have shared values. We have, and that's the main thing. We don't understand the world the same way, but we have agreed upon certain things. We agree upon, basic human rights belong to all people, right? We believe in, in equity, and we believe in, in everybody being able to not just survive, but thrive in this world, right? Like we agree on basic things. And so I know that I can trust when I want to talk about something that we're coming from the same place. So yeah.
Yeah, it's having a very similar values, and that's how you have that trust in that circle. It's having the right people around you, because and I'm the same way. I don't like watching my back. And I've got friends that go back by, I don't know, about 40 years. Uh,
Yeah.
a long, long time. And that's because obviously they share similar values, which is what you're talking about. And it's very important, and especially when you're neurodiverse, because we don't want to be, what's the word for it? It's a situation we don't want to be judged, because we have certain things that happen with us. And it's like, as you say, you don't want to be explaining yourself again, and so on and so forth. But if you have certain people that you can talk and the straight talk, and they know about you, you know, you're going to be accepted.
Mm.
And as much as I'm a very straight person, I say it as it is, and trust me, it gets me into trouble sometimes saying it as it is. But it's nice to know that the people around you can rely on, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it is what it is. But look, Shanae, thank you for your time today. It was really interesting. I know you spoke about some really sore points, but you spoke about it. I think it's important to put things in perspective. Is there a way that people can contact you? I will put the details down below, but do you want
Yeah.
to say now how you could be contacted?
Yeah. Sure. The best way is through my website. It's www.consonate.world, and that's spelled CONCINNATE.world. All my contact information is there. Probably the quickest way is just send me a quick email. You can also subscribe to my email list there. I send out a weekly email with all kinds of information, podcasts I've recently been on, or a show I've been on, sharing some insights into my work, maybe a speech I'm currently working on, so on and so forth. I love to just share information with people. So I try to make them, and I think I do really well, because like 50% of people open and read through my emails.
That's
Like,
amazing.
and like 10 to 20%, depending on the email, click through and actually go through the links. So I feel like I have great, I have great engagement with the
You
people.
do.
So it is, and I write them. I, for a while, had someone come in, and I was doing marketing for me, and my engagement went right into the toilet. And so I took it back over, and I write all of those emails entirely myself. So they're directly from me, and you can respond directly to them in order to converse with me.
Yeah, that's really great. No, those numbers are really high, actually. That's not typical industry standards. So
It's not.
you're
It's not.
obviously, yeah, you're obviously sharing yourself in a really poignant way. So, but like I said, I'll be sharing the details down below so people can contact you, and anything that they need to ask you, they'll contact you. So that's good. But it's been a pleasure to have you, and I really appreciate the time you spent on there, and the conversation that you've created. It's all been value. And listeners, if I can just say, if anything resonates with you, please contact her, because she's got a wealth of experience, and it can only go in the good direction, in a positive way. So once again, Janine, thank you a lot. And the listeners, really appreciate you, and sayonara.